Love is for the weak. Alexander Stone's voice cut through his empty office like ice. Isabella cleaned silently behind him, invisible as always. She heard every bitter word. Victoria's brutal betrayal 3 years ago. I never loved you, Alexander. Only your money. Move, he snarled at ordinary workers. His disgust for common people was legendary. You're fired. Get out. No emotion. No compassion for the working class. Isabella observed with Christian compassion, praying silently for his broken soul. The brutal contrast, his world of corporate power, her humble reality below. These people disgust me, he told his board, gesturing at common employees outside. But Isabella saw past his cruelty with Christian love, recognizing his deep pain. He treated his staff like objects. You people are replaceable, he declared coldly. Isabella whispered Christian prayers for him, her faith unwavering despite his cruelty. The elevator ride showed the brutal divide, him in luxury, them in poverty. Two worlds, his brutal empire versus her Christian compassion and humble service. Alexander ruled from his tower, completely disconnected from the common people below. Isabella represented everything he despised, ordinary, poor, insignificant in his cruel world. The brutal reality, his world of power, her world of Christian faith and poverty. She moved through his brutal empire with Christian grace he couldn't understand. Common people are weak, he declared. They deserve their miserable lives. Every dawn she left, having served with Christian love despite his brutal contempt. But he had no idea that this simple woman held a secret that would change everything. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Hit like and subscribe for more incredible stories. Isabella opened her apartment door to find Sophia's bright smile waiting. Mama, look what I drew. The 8-year-old held up a crayon picture of their family. The warmth hit Isabella like sunlight after the cold corporate tower she'd just left. This was her real world, simple, humble, but overflowing with the kind of love money couldn't buy. Sophia's excited chatter about school filled every corner of their modest home with pure joy that Alexander's penthouse could never contain. Thank you, God, for this food and for keeping Mama safe at work, Sophia prayed sweetly. Isabella squeezed her daughter's small hand, her heart full of gratitude for their nightly ritual before their simple meal of rice and beans with chicken. And please bless the sad man where Mama works, Sophia added innocently. Isabella's eyes widened. She'd never mentioned Alexander, but children sense things adults miss. This humble dinner table held more wealth than any corporate boardroom. I don't understand this math problem, Mama. Sophia's frustrated voice tugged at Isabella's heart. Let's try again, mi amor. Remember what I always tell you. Isabella guided her daughter's pencil gently. With patience and faith, even the hardest things become possible. Sophia smiled as understanding dawned. Like when you learned English for your job? Isabella nodded, remembering the nights she'd studied after Sophia slept, determined to provide better for her daughter through education and perseverance. As Isabella tucked Sophia under their grandmother's quilt, her daughter's eyes found a framed photograph on their nightstand. Tell me about Daddy again. Isabella's heart ached as she touched the military portrait, her husband in dress uniform, handsome and proud. Daddy was a hero, mi amor. He died protecting other people when you were very little. Sophia traced the glass with tiny fingers. Is he watching us from heaven? Isabella kissed her forehead. Every single day, baby. Every single day. 20 blocks away, Alexander stepped into his penthouse to deafening silence. Marble floors stretched endlessly. Designer furniture sat unused. Priceless art adorned walls that never heard laughter. The space was a monument to wealth, but a tomb for the soul. He loosened his Italian silk tie and moved toward the bar like a ghost haunting his own life. No child's drawing adorned his refrigerator. No warm voice called his name. Only emptiness echoing off expensive surfaces. Alexander poured 3 fingers of 30-year-old whiskey, the same ritual for 3 years since Victoria's betrayal. The crystal decanter caught city lights, refracting them like broken dreams. To another day in paradise, he muttered bitterly to his reflection in the bottle. The whiskey burned his throat, but couldn't warm the ice that had formed around his heart. Each sip was a reminder that money could buy the finest liquor, but couldn't purchase a single moment of genuine companionship. From his leather chair, Alexander stared at the one photograph he couldn't destroy, him and Victoria at their engagement party, both radiating hope and happiness. "I loved you," he whispered to the image. Victoria's face smiled back, beautiful and treacherous. In the photo, his younger self believed in forever. Now he knew better. Love was a luxury that cost everything and delivered nothing but destruction. The photograph trembled in his hands as memories of their last fight echoed in his mind. Back in her apartment, Isabella sat in the gentle silence after Sophia's bedtime. The contrast between her world and Alexander's couldn't be starker. She had everything that mattered. He had nothing that counted. She thought about the broken man she witnessed each night, working late in his glass tower, surrounded by luxury but drowning in loneliness. "Everyone deserves love," she whispered to the darkness, her faith unwavering even when faced with his daily cruelty toward people like her. Alexander lay on Egyptian cotton sheets worth more than most people's cars, but sleep wouldn't come. The silence was oppressive. No gentle breathing beside him, no warmth against his skin, no whispered, "I love you," to chase away the nightmares. Victoria had taken more than his money. She'd stolen his ability to trust, to hope, to believe that anyone could love him for who he was rather than what he owned. The moonlight felt as cold as his heart. Isabella knelt beside their coffee table, her worn Bible open to Psalms, candlelight dancing across pages softened by years of reading. She prayed for Sophia's future, for strength to provide as a single mother, and surprisingly, for the broken man in the tower. "Lord, soften his heart. Show him that love isn't weakness. It's the only strength that matters." Tomorrow would bring the discovery that would change both their lives. But tonight, she simply prayed for a soul she believed could still be saved. Isabella was dusting Alexander's mahogany desk when the scattered papers caught her eye. Legal jargon filled the documents, but certain phrases made her heart race. Transfer of assets, dissolution of partnership rights. Robert Hayes, secondary beneficiary. Her cleaning cloth froze in midair. These weren't normal business contracts. They were carefully crafted traps. "Dios mío," she whispered, her hands trembling as she realized what she was seeing. Someone was planning to destroy Alexander completely. The more Isabella read, the clearer the conspiracy became. Robert Hayes, Alexander's most trusted friend, had orchestrated a systematic plan to steal everything. Property transfers, financial instruments, partnership dissolutions, all designed to leave Alexander bankrupt while Robert claimed his empire. How could someone do this to their friend? Isabella's Christian heart broke for the betrayal Alexander was about to face. She'd witnessed his coldness, but no one deserved this kind of treachery. Isabella's hands shook as she held the evidence of Robert's betrayal. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Should she warn the man who treated her like she didn't exist? Alexander Stone had shown her nothing but indifference, never acknowledging her humanity or her service. "He despises people like me," she murmured. But her faith whispered back, "Love your enemies. Do good to those who hurt you." The battle between human hurt and Christian duty played across her gentle features. Faith won over feelings. Isabella pulled out a small notepad and wrote carefully, "Mr. Stone, check the contracts Robert Hayes wants you to sign tomorrow. They will destroy you. A friend who cares." She disguised her handwriting and signed it simply as someone who sees the truth. Her hands trembled as she folded the note. This simple act of kindness toward a man who had shown her only coldness reflected the depth of her Christian character and her unwavering belief that everyone deserved protection from evil. The next morning, Alexander strode into the boardroom, where Robert Hayes waited with his usual warm smile and a thick stack of contracts. "Alex, perfect timing. How about the deals of a lifetime here?" Robert's friendly greeting masked the knife he was preparing to plunge into his best friend's back. Alexander had trusted this man for over a decade, the one person he'd allowed close after Victoria's betrayal. The irony was bitter. While protecting his heart from love, he'd left himself vulnerable to betrayal in business. We need to move fast on these, Alex. The window closes today. Robert's pressure was relentless as he pushed contract after contract toward Alexander. His friendly demeanor barely concealed growing anxiety as he pointed his signature lines. Trust me, these partnerships will triple our profits within a year. The documents were deliberately complex, filled with legal jargon designed to hide their true purpose. Robert's desperation grew more obvious with each passing minute, though Alexander hadn't yet noticed the trap being set. Before returning to the signing meeting, Alexander discovered the folded note on his desk. His first reaction was anger. Who dared interfere with his business? Someone who sees the truth? He read the warning again, his sharp business instincts finally stirring. The handwriting was feminine, careful, almost gentle. Something about the phrase, "a friend who cares," struck him as oddly sincere. In a world where everyone wanted something from him, this mysterious warning seemed to expect nothing in return. Back in the boardroom, Alexander hesitated with his platinum pen hovering over the signature line. The anonymous warning echoed in his mind. They will destroy you. Robert's friendly mask began to slip as he noticed Alexander's reluctance. What's wrong, Alex? These are golden opportunities. His voice carried an edge of desperation now. The room filled with tension as Robert's pressure became more aggressive. Sign now, or we lose everything. That evening, Isabella returned to clean with her heart pounding. She had crossed an invisible line by interfering in Alexander's business world, risking her job and her family's security. As she cleaned around his desk, she searched for any sign of whether he'd found her warning. Please, God, let him have seen it, she whispered. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her shoulders. She had risked everything to help a man who might never even appreciate her sacrifice. As Isabella finished her shift and prepared to leave, she looked up at Alexander's office window, where the lights burned bright into the night. She whispered a prayer for his protection and wisdom, asking God to guide him away from Robert's trap. Tomorrow would reveal whether her anonymous warning had been enough to save the man who claimed love didn't exist, or whether his misplaced trust and friendship would lead him to sign away everything he had worked to build. The battle for Alexander's empire was about to begin. Alexander sat at the conference table, but this time he read every single word with the intensity of a man whose life depended on it. The anonymous warning had awakened his survival instincts, and what he discovered made his blood turn to ice. Hidden in the complex legal language were clauses that would strip him of everything: his company, his assets, his voting rights. Son of a bitch, he muttered under his breath. Robert's betrayal was so complete, so methodically planned, that Alexander felt physically sick as the reality crashed over him like a tidal wave. Alexander's knuckles turned white as he gripped the contracts that would have destroyed him completely. Every signature line was a death sentence, every clause a dagger aimed at his heart. Robert had been planning this betrayal for months, maybe years, positioning every piece on the chessboard while wearing the mask of friendship. You clever bastard, Alexander thought, his jaw clenching as he realized how close he'd come to signing away his entire life's work to the man he'd trusted like a brother. Alexander exploded from his chair, like a predator finally cornering his prey. Did you really think I wouldn't discover your little scheme, Robert? His voice was deadly quiet, each word dripping with the kind of controlled fury that had made him legendary in boardrooms across Manhattan. Robert's face drained of color as he realized his elaborate plan had been exposed. His nervous laugh only served to fuel the inferno building in Alexander's piercing blue eyes. The mask finally shattered. Robert's friendly facade crumbled, revealing years of hidden resentment and jealousy. You think you deserve everything you have, Alex? Robert snarled, his face twisted with bitter hatred. You've never appreciated what you built, never valued the people who helped you climb to the top. I've lived in your shadow long enough. The boardroom crackled with electricity as decades of suppressed rage poured out like poison, and Alexander realized his oldest friend had become his most dangerous enemy. Robert's desperation made him reckless as he revealed the full scope of his treachery. "Victoria and I planned this together, Alex. She never stopped wanting to destroy you." The words hit Alexander like physical blows. His ex-wife and best friend, working together to systematically dismantle everything he'd built. The divorce hadn't been the end of Victoria's revenge. It had been just the opening move in a chess game designed to leave him broken and bankrupt. "We were going to split everything between us while you had nothing." After Robert stormed out with threats of legal warfare and promises to destroy him through the courts, Alexander sat alone in the devastated boardroom. Contracts lay scattered like fallen leaves, chairs overturned from their violent confrontation. The magnitude of the betrayal was overwhelming. Not just Robert, but Victoria too, working in perfect harmony to orchestrate his complete destruction. He had lost his company, his fortune, his oldest friendship, and discovered that even his marriage had been part of an elaborate long-term plan to rob him blind. Within hours, news of the explosive confrontation spread through the building like wildfire. Employees gathered in clusters, whispering and pointing as Alexander walked past. Some looked at him with pity, others with the calculating interest of people wondering if they should update their resumes. "Did you hear? Mr. Stone lost everything. Robert Hayes is taking over the company. I heard Victoria was involved too." Alexander's empire was crumbling in real time, and everyone could sense that their once invincible CEO was suddenly, shockingly vulnerable. Alexander's office became ground zero for catastrophe as phones rang constantly with increasingly devastating news. "Mr. Stone, they've frozen your primary accounts." "Sir, the board is calling an emergency meeting." "Alexander, we need to discuss the injunctions immediately." Robert's legal team had moved with military precision, filing lawsuits, freezing assets, and launching coordinated attacks designed to tie up Alexander's resources in court battles he couldn't afford to fight. The systematic destruction of his empire was unfolding exactly as his enemies had planned. As darkness fell over Manhattan, Alexander sat alone in his office with his head buried in his hands, utterly defeated for the first time in his adult life. Everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed for, was being systematically destroyed by the two people he had trusted most in this world. The irony cut deeper than any knife. He had closed his heart to love to protect himself from betrayal, only to be betrayed by friendship and business partnership instead. The man who had claimed to have everything now faced losing it all. Isabella arrived for her midnight cleaning shift to discover a scene that broke her heart. Through his office door, she could see Alexander's silhouette, no longer the intimidating billionaire she had known, but a broken man staring blankly at the city lights below. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his powerful shoulders slumped in defeat. This was the moment when their worlds would truly collide, when an invisible cleaning woman would finally be seen by the man who had lost everything, and when Alexander Stone would discover that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Alexander stared at the eviction notice on his marble counter, the words blurring together. Failure to pay. Immediate possession required. Vacate within 24 hours. His penthouse, the symbol of everything he'd achieved, was being stripped away like everything else. 20 years of work gone, he muttered, throwing expensive suits into cardboard boxes. The irony wasn't lost on him. The man who had fired countless employees was now packing his own belongings, facing homelessness for the first time in his privileged life. His hands shook as reality crashed down around him. Isabella opened her apartment door to find the last person she'd ever expected, Alexander Stone, standing in her humble hallway with 2 expensive suitcases and a look of desperate pride on his face. He began, then stopped, his jaw clenching. The words seemed to strangle him. "I need help." The admission came out like a confession torn from his soul. Isabella's heart broke seeing this powerful man reduced to asking for charity from someone he'd treated as invisible. Her Christian compassion overrode every hurt feeling. "Please," Alexander forced the word out, his pride crumbling with each syllable. "I have nowhere else to go. Everyone else, they've all abandoned me." Isabella saw the shame burning in his eyes, the humiliation of a king reduced to begging. She stepped aside without hesitation. "Come in," she said softly. Alexander hesitated, staring at her modest doorway like it was the gates of hell. "Your daughter," he began. "Sophia will understand," Isabella replied. "We don't turn away people in need." The simple kindness in her voice nearly broke him. Alexander stood awkwardly in Isabella's tiny living room, his expensive suit completely out of place among the second-hand furniture and Sophia's colorful drawings taped to the walls. "Mama, who's this?" Sophia asked with innocent curiosity, skipping into the room. "This is Mr. Stone, mi amor. He needs a place to stay for a little while." Alexander stared at the child, expecting fear or judgment, but Sophia simply smiled. "Are you sad? You look sad." Her pure honesty hit him harder than any boardroom confrontation ever had. Isabella served their simple dinner, rice, beans, and chicken, on mismatched plates that probably cost less than Alexander's single lunch used to. He sat at their worn wooden table, feeling like an alien in a strange world. "Let's pray," Isabella said, extending her hands. Alexander froze. "I don't," he began. "You don't have to," she said gently, "but you're welcome to join us." Sophia grabbed his large hand with her tiny one. "God, thank you for our food and for helping Mr. Stone when he's sad," she prayed innocently. That evening, Isabella brought Alexander a pillow and one of her grandmother's quilts for the small sofa that would be his bed. The contrast was staggering, from Egyptian cotton sheets worth thousands to a handmade quilt that had seen decades of love. "I know this isn't what you're used to," Isabella said quietly. Alexander touched the soft fabric, feeling something he hadn't experienced in years. "It's warm," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." The words felt foreign on his tongue, but somehow right. Alexander woke to unfamiliar sounds. Sophia's laughter, Isabella's gentle voice reminding her daughter to brush her teeth, the smell of coffee brewing in a humble kitchen. For a moment, he forgot where he was, expecting to see marble floors and city views. Instead, he found himself wrapped in a grandmother's quilt, surrounded by the warmth of a real home. "Good morning, Mr. Stone," Sophia called cheerfully, backpack bouncing as she headed to school. "Mama made extra coffee for you." The simple kindness overwhelmed him. A sharp knock interrupted the morning peace. Isabella opened the door to find Victoria Stone, perfectly coiffed, wearing designer clothes worth more than Isabella's annual salary, her green eyes cold as winter ice. Well, so this is where the mighty Alexander Stone has fallen," Victoria said, pushing past Isabella into the apartment. Alexander emerged from the living room, his face hardening into the mask Isabella knew so well. "What do you want, Victoria?" His voice could have frozen fire. "I came to make you an offer. I'll give you back a portion of what we took," Victoria said with false sweetness, pulling out legal documents. "Enough to get you a decent apartment, maybe a small job somewhere. All you have to do is sign these papers absolving Robert and me of any legal responsibility." Alexander stared at the woman who had destroyed his life, offering him scraps from his own table. "You want me to sign away my right to justice?" Victoria's smile was razor-sharp. "Consider it a generous divorce settlement. After all, you should be grateful I'm offering anything at all." Isabella watched Victoria's manipulation with growing disgust. This woman had systematically destroyed Alexander's life and now wanted to twist the knife deeper. "He doesn't need your scraps," Isabella said quietly, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Victoria turned, noticing the cleaning woman for the first time. "Excuse me? Who are you to speak in this conversation?" Isabella squared her shoulders, her faith giving her courage. "I'm someone who knows what real love looks like. And what you're offering isn't generosity. It's cruelty disguised as mercy." Victoria's eyes flashed with fury at being challenged by someone she considered beneath notice. Victoria spread the legal documents across Isabella's humble coffee table like a predator displaying her kill. "Look, Alexander, I'm being more than generous here. These papers will give you back enough money to start over, a small apartment, maybe even seed money for a modest business venture. All you have to do is sign away your right to pursue legal action against Robert and me." Alexander studied the papers with the sharp focus of a man who had learned to recognize traps. The offer was designed to look generous while actually being the final insult, his own money being offered back to him as charity, with the price being his dignity and his right to justice. "You really think I'm that desperate?" he said quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. Isabella watched Victoria's manipulation with the quiet perception of someone who understood genuine love versus calculated cruelty. Every word from Victoria's mouth was designed to wound, to make Alexander feel smaller and more desperate. "Come on, darling," Victoria purred with false sweetness. "Look where your pride has gotten you. Living in—" She glanced around Isabella's apartment with obvious disdain. "This charming little hovel with the help. How the mighty have fallen." Isabella felt her Christian patience being tested as she witnessed Victoria's deliberate cruelty. This woman wasn't just offering a business deal. She was savoring Alexander's humiliation, twisting the knife she'd already plunged into his heart. Isabella couldn't stay silent any longer. She stepped forward, her voice soft but carrying the strength of absolute conviction. "Mrs. Stone, I think you should leave." Victoria turned sharply, her green eyes flashing with surprise and indignation. "Excuse me? I don't believe I was speaking to you." Isabella didn't back down, her faith giving her courage she didn't know she possessed. "This is my home, and I won't allow anyone to use cruelty as a weapon here. Alexander doesn't need your charity. What he needs is healing, not more poison from someone who has already hurt him enough." The room fell silent as Victoria stared in shock at being challenged by a woman she had dismissed as insignificant. Alexander stared at Isabella with growing amazement as she continued speaking with the quiet authority of someone whose convictions ran deeper than fear. "Real love doesn't keep score of past hurts or demand payment for forgiveness. It doesn't offer scraps when someone is hungry or mock someone when they're down. What you're doing isn't generosity. It's another form of the same cruelty that destroyed his trust in the first place." Her words hit Alexander like lightning bolts of truth. For 3 years, he had believed that love was weakness, but here was a woman showing him that love could be the strongest force in the universe when it was real, when it was grounded in something greater than selfish desire. Victoria's composure cracked completely, revealing the ugly truth beneath her polished exterior. "How dare you lecture me? You insignificant little cleaning woman. You know nothing about what Alexander and I shared, nothing about the complexities of real relationships. You're just a naive little girl playing house with a man who will discard you the moment he gets back on his feet." Her voice rose to a shriek, her carefully maintained mask of sophistication falling away to reveal the vindictive, bitter woman underneath. Isabella absorbed the verbal assault with grace, her expression remaining calm and compassionate. "I'm sorry you're hurting so much that you need to hurt others," she replied gently. "But that pain doesn't give you the right to destroy other people's lives." Alexander rose slowly from Isabella's couch, and for the first time in months, he stood with the full dignity of a man who knew his worth. "Get out, Victoria." His voice was quiet, but carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had finally seen through all the lies and manipulation. "Take your papers, take your fake generosity, and get out of this home where people understand what real love actually means." Victoria's eyes widened with shock. This wasn't the broken, desperate man she had expected to find. Alexander's time in Isabella's humble apartment, witnessing genuine love and selfless service, had begun to heal something inside him that money could never touch. "You can keep every penny you stole," he continued, "because I've just realized that everything truly valuable in life can't be bought or sold." Victoria gathered her papers with shaking hands, her fury making her movements sharp and desperate. "You'll regret this, Alexander, when you're living in poverty for the rest of your life. Remember that I offered you a way out." She stormed toward the door, then turned back for one final strike. "And you," she pointed at Isabella with venom, "when he gets tired of playing poor and tosses you aside like yesterday's trash, don't say I didn't warn you." The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the windows, leaving a sudden, profound silence in her wake. Alexander and Isabella stood together in the aftermath, both breathing heavily from the emotional confrontation. But somehow the apartment felt cleaner, lighter, as if Victoria had taken all the poison with her when she left. In the silence that followed Victoria's departure, Alexander looked at Isabella with completely new eyes. This gentle woman who cleaned his office floors had just stood up to his formidable ex-wife with more courage and dignity than he had ever shown. "Why did you defend me?" he asked quietly, his voice filled with genuine wonder. "You barely know me, and what you do know, I haven't exactly been kind to you." Isabella met his gaze with her warm brown eyes, and Alexander saw something there he had forgotten existed: pure, unconditional compassion. "Because everyone deserves love, Mr. Stone, even when they've forgotten how to love themselves." Her words hit him like a revelation, cracking open walls around his heart that he had thought were permanent. Isabella sat across from Alexander on her small couch, her voice gentle but firm as she shared the wisdom that had carried her through her own darkest times. Love isn't about what someone can give you or how they make you feel. Real love is about seeing someone's pain and choosing to help heal it, even when they've hurt you. It's about believing in their capacity for goodness, even when they've forgotten it themselves. Alexander listened with the intensity of a man dying of thirst who had just found water. "After my husband died, I was so angry at God, at the world, at everyone who still had their families intact. But I learned that anger only poisoned my own heart. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing what happened. It was about freeing myself to love again." As evening approached and Isabella began preparing their simple dinner, Alexander felt something shifting deep inside his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, he understood the difference between the possessive, conditional love he had known with Victoria and the selfless, healing love he was witnessing in this humble apartment. But their peaceful moment was interrupted when Sophia burst through the door, her school backpack bouncing with excitement. "Mama, Mama, something terrible happened at school today. Jenny's mom got really sick and had to go to the hospital, and now Jenny is so scared because the doctors don't know what's wrong." Isabella's face immediately filled with concern for her friend's child, but neither she nor Alexander could have predicted that Sophia's news would soon test everything they had just learned about love, sacrifice, and the power of faith to move mountains. Isabella's hand trembled as she read the thermometer, 104.2 degrees. Sophia's small body was burning with fever, her breathing shallow and labored. "Mama, I can't breathe right," Sophia whispered weakly, her usually bright eyes glazed with illness. Isabella's heart clenched with terror as she recognized the symptoms she'd read about in parenting magazines. This wasn't just a simple cold. "Mi amor, we need to get you to the hospital right now," she said, trying to keep her voice calm while panic screamed through her mind. She wrapped Sophia in blankets, her hands shaking as she realized this could be pneumonia or something even worse. "Alexander, wake up. Something's wrong with Sophia." Isabella's voice cracked with barely controlled panic as she searched through drawers for their insurance papers. Alexander bolted upright from the couch, instantly alert as he saw Isabella's terror-stricken face. "What happened?" he asked, his business instincts kicking in even as his heart rate spiked. "She has a high fever and trouble breathing. I think it's pneumonia. I need to get her to the emergency room, but—" Isabella's voice broke as reality hit her. "I don't have enough money for the hospital bills if it's serious. Our insurance barely covers anything." Alexander didn't hesitate for a single second. "Give her to me," he said, gently taking Sophia from Isabella's arms and striding toward his car with purpose. At the hospital, he bypassed the normal admission process entirely, his commanding presence still intact despite his recent losses. "I need the best pediatric pulmonologist you have, and I need them now," he told the triage nurse with the authority of a man accustomed to getting immediate results. "This child needs the VIP treatment, and money is no object." Isabella stared at him in amazement. The cold billionaire she had known was gone, replaced by a man who genuinely cared about her daughter's life. Alexander worked his phone like a man possessed, calling in every favor he still had left in his network. "Dr. Martinez, I don't care what it costs or who you have to wake up. I need you at Metropolitan Hospital right now. A little girl's life depends on it." His voice carried the same commanding authority that had once moved millions in business deals, but now was fueled by something entirely different: genuine love for a child who had shown him nothing but innocent kindness. Isabella watched in amazement as this man who claimed love was weakness fought harder for her daughter than she had ever seen anyone fight for anything. "I want the best pediatric infectious disease specialist in the city here within the hour," Alexander barked into his phone while pacing the hospital corridor like a caged tiger. Meanwhile, Isabella finally allowed herself to break down as the full weight of her terror crashed over her. "She's all I have left," she sobbed, sliding down the wall to sit on the cold hospital floor. "If I lose her—" Alexander immediately ended his call and knelt beside her, something he would never have done just weeks ago. "Hey, look at me," he said gently, his voice completely different from the commanding tone he'd been using with doctors. "We're not going to lose her. I promise you that." Isabella led Alexander to the small hospital chapel, where she immediately fell to her knees before a simple wooden cross. "Please, God," she whispered through tears, "don't take my baby. She's so young, so innocent. Take me instead if you have to take someone." Alexander stood awkwardly behind her, watching this display of raw faith with something approaching awe. He hadn't prayed since childhood, had abandoned belief in anything greater than money and power years ago. But seeing Isabella's absolute trust in God, even in her darkest moment, Alexander found himself slowly kneeling beside her on the cold chapel floor. I don't know how to do this," Alexander admitted quietly, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't control. "I haven't prayed since I was Sophia's age." Isabella took his hand gently, her fingers warm and steady despite her tears. "Just talk to him like you would talk to someone who loves you," she whispered. Alexander closed his eyes, feeling foolish but desperate. "God, if you're listening, please don't let that little girl die. She's pure and good and innocent, everything I'm not. If you want to punish someone for their mistakes, punish me. But please, please let Sophia live." The words came out broken and raw, torn from a heart that was learning to feel again after years of frozen numbness. Through the longest night of their lives, Alexander and Isabella took turns holding Sophia's small hand while machines monitored her every heartbeat and breath. Alexander had spent his last available credit securing the best medical team money could buy, bankrupting himself completely in the process, but he didn't care about a single penny. "She called me sad when I first came to your apartment," he told Isabella quietly around 3 a.m. "She was the first person in years to see past my armor to the broken man underneath. How did an 8-year-old see what adults couldn't?" Isabella squeezed his hand. "Children see with their hearts, not their eyes. Sophia saw your pain because she has a gift for loving broken things back to wholeness." As dawn broke over the city, a miracle unfolded in room 314. Sophia's breathing became stronger and more regular, her fever finally breaking after 12 hours of crisis. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing first on her mother's tear-streaked face, then on Alexander, sitting in an uncomfortable hospital chair. "Mr. Stone," she whispered weakly, "did you stay here all night?" Alexander felt tears he hadn't shed in decades rolling down his cheeks as he leaned forward to touch her forehead, finding it cool and normal for the first time in hours. "I wasn't going anywhere, princess. Not until I knew you were okay." Sophia smiled weakly. "I dreamed about my daddy. He said thank you for taking care of us." As Dr. Martinez explained Sophia's remarkable recovery to them in the hallway, Isabella watched Alexander with new eyes. This was not the same man who had declared love was for the weak just weeks ago. This was someone who had discovered that love wasn't weakness at all. It was the strongest force in the universe, capable of moving mountains and working miracles. She'll make a full recovery, Dr. Martinez assured them, but it was touch and go for several hours. If you hadn't gotten her here when you did, and if she hadn't received such immediate, aggressive treatment. Alexander felt Isabella's hand slip into his, and for the first time in his adult life, he understood what it meant to love someone more than himself. The realization would change everything about who he thought he was and what he believed was possible in this world. Back in Isabella's apartment after Sophia's recovery, Alexander found himself helping organize the chaos of medical bills and insurance paperwork that had accumulated during their hospital vigil. "I can't thank you enough for what you did," Isabella said softly, sorting through documents with tired but grateful hands. "Sophia wouldn't be here without you." Alexander shook his head, still processing his own transformation. "I should be thanking you, both of you. Before Sophia got sick, I thought love was just another word people use to manipulate each other. But watching you fight for her life, seeing your faith when everything looked hopeless." His voice trailed off as he reached for another stack of papers to help organize. Alexander's hand froze as he opened a manila folder marked personal documents and found himself staring at military certificates, commendation letters, and photographs he never expected to see. His breath caught in his throat as he lifted a formal military portrait. A young man in dress uniform, handsome and proud, with kind eyes and Isabella's gentle smile. "Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez, United States Army," he read aloud from the commendation letter beneath the photo. "Awarded the Bronze Star for valor in combat operations." The name hit him like a physical blow, memories flooding back with crystal clarity. This was the face he had tried so desperately to remember for 10 years. The photograph trembled in Alexander's hands as 10-year-old memories crashed over him like a tidal wave. The desert heat, the explosion, the ringing in his ears, and then this man, this exact face, pulling him from the wreckage of his military transport vehicle. "No, this can't be," Alexander whispered, his voice barely audible. Isabella looked up from her paperwork, noticing his pale complexion and shaking hands. "Alexander, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." He turned to her with eyes wide with shock and dawning understanding. "This man," he said, holding up Miguel's portrait. "This is your husband?" Isabella nodded, confused by his reaction. "Yes, that's Miguel. But how do you—" Isabella sat down heavily as Alexander began to speak, his voice thick with emotion. 10 years ago, I was in Afghanistan on a business inspection tour of military contractor facilities. Our convoy hit an IED, an improvised explosive device. I was trapped in a burning vehicle, unconscious, probably minutes from death. His hand shook as he continued. A sergeant pulled me out, saved my life, then went back for other survivors. He died in the second explosion while trying to rescue more people. Isabella's eyes filled with tears as she realized what Alexander was telling her. Miguel died saving strangers because that's who he was, someone who put other people's lives before his own. I never learned his name, never got to thank him properly. Alexander closed his eyes, and suddenly he was back in the Afghan desert, smoke and flames everywhere, his vision blurry from the concussion. He could see Miguel's face clearly now, the same kind eyes from the photograph, filled with determination and courage as he pulled Alexander from the twisted metal. "Stay with me, sir. You're going to be okay." Miguel had shouted over the chaos. "I've got a wife and little girl back home, and they're praying for me to help people like you." Those have been almost his exact words, Alexander remembered now. Miguel had talked about Isabella and Sophia, even while risking his life to save complete strangers. The man had literally died living out his faith and love for his family. Isabella reached across the coffee table and took Alexander's hands in hers, her brown eyes swimming with tears but filled with peaceful certainty. "I've known who you were since the day I started working in your building," she said softly. Alexander stared at her, in complete shock. You knew? Isabella nodded, her voice gentle but steady. After Miguel died, the army told me he saved several civilians in that bombing. I saw you on the news later, talking about the unknown soldier who gave his life for others. I recognized your description of what happened. When I found out you worked in the building where I got my cleaning job, I knew it wasn't coincidence. It was God's plan. For 3 years, I've cleaned your office and prayed for you every single night. Isabella continued, her voice filled with quiet conviction. I watched you become harder and colder, more bitter and isolated, and I knew that Miguel's sacrifice was being wasted if the man he saved couldn't learn to live again, couldn't learn to love again. Alexander felt tears streaming down his face as the full magnitude of her love and sacrifice hit him. You knew who I was, and you still, even when I was cruel to you, when I treated you like you didn't exist. Isabella squeezed his hands tighter. Miguel died believing that every life has value, that everyone deserves to be saved. I couldn't honor his memory by giving up on the man whose life he gave everything to preserve. Alexander buried his face in his hands as the weight of divine providence crushed his remaining defenses. All this time, I thought I was alone. I thought no one cared whether I lived or died. I built walls to protect myself from ever being hurt again, and I became exactly the kind of person your husband died, trying to save people from. His voice broke completely. Isabella, I am so sorry for how I treated you, for wasting the life Miguel died to give me, for being too blind and broken to see the miracle that was happening right in front of me. Isabella moved to sit beside him on the couch, her arms wrapping around him with the same gentle strength that had carried her through widowhood and single motherhood. Alexander, look at me, Isabella said gently, lifting his chin so their eyes met. Miguel didn't save your life so you could spend it in perfect gratitude or never make mistakes. He saved you because he believed every person deserves a chance at love, at happiness, at redemption. The man you became after Victoria's betrayal, that wasn't the real you. That was just someone so hurt and scared that you forgot who you really were. Her words penetrated the deepest layers of his wounded soul. God doesn't waste anything, not even our mistakes and pain. He uses it all to bring us to exactly where we need to be, with exactly the people we need to heal us. Alexander felt something fundamental shifting inside his chest. Walls crumbling that he had spent years building, light flooding into places that had been dark for so long he'd forgotten what hope felt like. As Alexander and Isabella sat together in the aftermath of this life-changing revelation, the apartment door burst open with Sophia's usual enthusiasm as she returned from school. "Mama, Mr. Stone, guess what happened today?" She stopped short when she saw their tear-streaked faces and the military documents scattered across the coffee table. With the intuitive wisdom that children possess, Sophia walked over and looked at her father's photograph, then at Alexander, then back at the photo. "Daddy saved you, didn't he?" she said simply, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Alexander nodded, unable to speak. Sophia climbed onto the couch between them and took both their hands. "That's why God brought you to us. Daddy's still taking care of people, even from heaven." In that moment, Alexander finally understood that love wasn't weakness at all. It was the force that moves mountains, saves lives, and redeems even the most broken souls. Isabella took a deep breath, her voice steady with the conviction of someone who had wrestled with God's plan and found peace in it. "From the moment I knew who you were, I understood that God hadn't brought me to that building by accident. Every night for 3 years, I prayed that somehow, some way, you would find the healing that Miguel's sacrifice was meant to give you." Alexander stared at her with wonder and shame intermingled. "You could have told me who you were at any time. You could have demanded my gratitude, my money, my respect. Instead, you served me in silence while I treated you like garbage." Isabella shook her head gently. Real love doesn't demand recognition or payment. It just gives and trusts God to work in his own time and way. "Isabella, I am so ashamed of the man I became," Alexander said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Your husband died to save me, and I repaid that sacrifice by becoming exactly the kind of selfish, heartless person he died fighting against. How can you even look at me without hatred? Isabella moved closer to him on the couch, her brown eyes filled with compassion rather than condemnation. Because hatred would dishonor Miguel's memory more than anything you could ever do. He didn't save your life, so I could spend mine judging you for your mistakes. He saved you because he believed in the power of love to transform even the hardest heart. And look, she gestured around their humble apartment. He was right. You're not the same man who fired people without mercy or treated the poor with contempt. Do you understand what happened here, Alexander? Isabella asked, her voice filled with quiet awe at God's intricate planning. God didn't just save your life through Miguel. He orchestrated everything that followed. Victoria's betrayal, Robert's conspiracy, your financial ruin, even Sophia's illness. All of it was designed to strip away everything false and temporary so you could discover what was real and eternal. Alexander felt goosebumps rising on his arms as the full scope of divine providence became clear to him. You mean to tell me that losing everything was actually part of God's plan to save my soul? Isabella nodded, tears in her eyes. Sometimes we have to lose everything we think we want before we can receive everything we actually need. Alexander shook his head in amazement as understanding dawned. You never tried to manipulate me or force me to change. You just loved me, even when I was unlovable, even when I didn't deserve it. Isabella smiled through her tears. That's what real love does. It doesn't try to control or change people through guilt or manipulation. It just creates a safe space where people can choose to become who they were always meant to be. Alexander felt his last defenses crumbling. I spent so many years believing that love was about possession, about getting what I wanted from someone else. But what you've shown me is that love is about sacrifice, about giving everything and expecting nothing in return. Miguel used to tell me that every person God puts in our path is there for a reason. Isabella continued, her voice soft with memory and faith. He said we're all broken people trying to help other broken people find their way home to love. When he saved your life, he wasn't just rescuing you from that burning vehicle. He was rescuing you from a life without purpose, without real connection, without the joy that comes from serving something greater than yourself. Alexander felt tears streaming down his face as he finally understood what his survival had meant. He gave his life so that I could learn to give mine. Not for money or power or revenge, but for love, for family, for people like you and Sophia who deserve protection and care. Their profound conversation was interrupted by a news report playing on Isabella's small television. Breaking news tonight. Prominent businessman Robert Hayes and socialite Victoria Stone have been arrested on charges of corporate fraud and conspiracy. Alexander and Isabella turned to watch as the reporter detailed the FBI investigation that had uncovered the elaborate scheme to defraud Alexander's company. Federal prosecutors say the case involves millions of dollars in illegal asset transfers and fraudulent business practices spanning several years. Alexander stared at the screen in shock. I never pursued legal action against them. How did this happen? Isabella squeezed his hand. Sometimes justice comes from unexpected places. Maybe this is God's way of clearing your name without you having to seek revenge. As the news report continued, detailing how authorities had frozen Robert and Victoria's assets and begun the process of returning stolen funds to their victims, Alexander felt strangely detached from what should have been triumphant news. A few months ago, this would have been the best day of my life, he said quietly. Getting my money back, seeing my enemies destroyed, having my reputation restored. But now, he looked around Isabella's humble apartment, at Sophia's colorful drawings on the walls, at the woman who had taught him what real wealth looked like. Now I realize that I already have everything that truly matters. The money they stole was just paper. What you and Sophia have given me, that's priceless. What will you do now? Isabella asked gently. When your assets are restored, when you have your fortune back? Alexander didn't hesitate. I want to establish a foundation in Miguel's name something that helps military families, supports veterans' children, provides real assistance to people who are struggling the way we've been struggling. His voice grew stronger with conviction. I want to use every penny I get back to honor the man who saved my life by helping other people the way you've helped me. Miguel died believing that every life has value. I want to spend the rest of mine proving he was right. Isabella's smile was radiant. You will be so proud of the man you've become. Alexander took Isabella's hands in his voice thick with emotion and absolute certainty. Isabella, I need you to know something. I love you, not because of what you've done for me, not because you saved my life or taught me about faith. I love you because of who you are, the most beautiful soul I've ever encountered. And I love Sophia like she was my own daughter. Isabella's eyes filled with tears of joy. I love you too, Alexander. I have from the very beginning, even when you couldn't see it, even when you couldn't return it. Love isn't something you earn. It's something you receive as a gift. Their foreheads touched as they held each other, two broken people who had found wholeness in each other's arms. Sophia appeared in the doorway, having watched their emotional reunion with the wise eyes of a child who understands love intuitively. Are you going to be my new daddy? She asked Alexander directly, with the beautiful honesty that only children possess. Alexander knelt down to her level, his heart overflowing with love for this brave little girl who had helped save his soul. Only if you want me to be princess. But I promise you this, whether I'm your daddy or just your friend, I will never leave you and your mama. You're stuck with me forever. Sophia threw her arms around his neck. Good, because I prayed for God to send mama someone who would love us the way Daddy Miguel would want us to be loved. As Alexander held Sophia and Isabella wrapped her arms around both of them, he finally understood that he hadn't lost everything when his empire crumbled. He had gained everything that truly mattered. The man who had once believed love was for the weak had discovered that love was actually the strongest force in the universe, powerful enough to redeem any life and heal any wound. 6 months later, the small neighborhood church where Isabella had prayed for Alexander's healing was filled with warmth and joy as she walked down the aisle toward the man who had learned to love again. Alexander stood at the altar in a simple suit, his eyes filled with tears of gratitude as he watched his bride approach. Sophia skipped ahead as flower girl, scattering petals with the pure delight of a child whose prayers had been answered beyond her wildest dreams. The congregation was small but genuine. Neighbors who had watched Isabella struggle as a single mother and rejoiced to see her find love. Co-workers from Alexander's old building who had witnessed his transformation with amazement. Pastor Williams smiled as Alexander and Isabella joined hands before the simple wooden cross. Alexander, do you take Isabella to be your wife, to love and cherish in good times and bad? Alexander's voice was strong and clear as he spoke the words that came from his heart. Isabella, 6 months ago, I was a broken man who believed love was a lie. You showed me that love is the only truth worth living for. I promise to spend every day of my life loving you and Sophia with the same selfless devotion you showed me when I didn't deserve it. I promise to honor Miguel's sacrifice by being the husband and father he would want you to have. Isabella's vows were equally heartfelt. Alexander, I knew from the first day that God had brought you into our lives for a purpose. I promise to love you not just in your strength, but in your vulnerability, not just in your success, but in your struggles. When Sophia presented the wedding rings with ceremonial importance, Alexander knelt down to her level before placing the ring on Isabella's finger. Sophia, I want you to know that I'm not trying to replace your daddy Miguel. No one could ever do that. But I promise to love you and take care of you the way he would want. Sophia's response brought tears to every eye in the church. Daddy Miguel sent you to us. I asked him in my prayers, and he said yes. As Alexander slipped the simple gold band onto Isabella's finger, he whispered words that only she could hear. Thank you for seeing the man I could become when I couldn't see it myself. The congregation erupted in joyful applause as Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife. During the simple reception in the church fellowship hall, Alexander stood to address their guests with an announcement that surprised no one who had witnessed his transformation. 6 months ago, I thought success was measured by how much money I could accumulate and how many people feared me. Isabella and Sophia taught me that real success is measured by how many lives you can touch with love and service. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. Today, I'm officially announcing the Miguel Rodriguez Foundation, dedicated to supporting military families and veterans' children. Every dollar I recovered from my legal battles will go toward ensuring that no military family struggles alone the way Isabella and Sophia did. The Miguel Rodriguez Foundation became more than just a charity. It became Alexander's calling and redemption rolled into one. From a modest office space, he and Isabella coordinated comprehensive support for military families facing financial hardship, medical crises, and educational challenges. Alexander used his business expertise to maximize every donated dollar, while Isabella's compassionate heart ensured that every family received personal, caring attention. Sophia, now 9, had become the foundation's unofficial mascot, helping organize playgroups for younger children and showing them that it was possible to thrive after loss. The foundation's motto, inscribed on the wall in Miguel's honor, read simply, "Every life has value." One afternoon, a young widow named Maria arrived at the foundation with her toddler son, facing eviction and medical bills she couldn't pay after her husband's death in overseas combat. Alexander saw himself in her desperate pride, while Isabella recognized the fear and isolation she had once known so well. "Mrs. Martinez, your husband's sacrifice matters, and that means you and your son matter," Alexander told her gently. "We're not offering charity, we're offering family." As Isabella helped Maria fill out assistance forms while Sophia entertained the little boy with coloring books, Alexander marveled at how God had taken his broken life and transformed it into an instrument of healing for others. In their modest home, Alexander had chosen not to return to luxury, preferring the warmth of genuine simplicity. The family gathered each evening for dinner and prayer. "Thank you, God, for bringing us together," Sophia prayed with the earnest faith of a child. "Thank you for making Mr. Alexander my daddy, and for helping us help other families like Daddy Miguel helped other people." Alexander added his own prayer. "Thank you for teaching me that love isn't weakness, but the greatest strength. Thank you for Isabella's patience, Sophia's innocence, and Miguel's sacrifice that made all of this possible." Isabella concluded, "And thank you for proving that no life is beyond redemption when love is allowed to do its work." On the Foundation's first anniversary, Alexander stood before a gathering of military families whose lives had been touched by Miguel's legacy through their work. "A year ago, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. I was wrong. I had simply lost everything that didn't matter so I could find everything that did." He looked at Isabella and Sophia with eyes full of love. "I learned that real wealth isn't counted in bank accounts, but in relationships. Real power isn't about controlling others, but about serving them. And real love isn't about what you can get from someone, but what you can give." The applause was warm and genuine, but Alexander barely heard it. His attention was focused on Isabella's proud smile and Sophia's enthusiastic clapping. As the sun set over the city, Alexander and Isabella reviewed files of the families they had helped, dozens of stories of hope restored, children educated, medical bills paid, homes saved from foreclosure. "Do you ever miss it?" Isabella asked gently. "The penthouses, the power, the life you had before?" Alexander considered the question seriously, then shook his head. "How can I miss a life that was slowly killing my soul? I was the richest man in the city and the poorest man in every way that mattered." He pulled her close, marveling again at the miracle of their love. "Miguel saved my life twice, once in that desert and once through you. I was dying inside, and I didn't even know it until you taught me how to live again." As their story drew to a close, Alexander sat in their living room with Isabella curled against his side and Sophia asleep in his lap, a storybook fallen from her small hands. On the mantel, Miguel's military portrait watched over their family with what Alexander could swear was a smile of approval. "I was wrong about love," Alexander said quietly, his voice filled with wonder at the journey they had traveled together. "I thought it was for the weak, but it takes incredible strength to love someone unconditionally. I thought it was a lie people tell themselves, but it's the only truth powerful enough to change everything." Isabella squeezed his hand. "And I was right to never give up on you, because love always finds a way." Outside their window, the city lights twinkled like stars, but inside their home, they had found something more precious than any fortune. They had found each other, and in finding each other, they had found the true meaning of life itself. Where are you watching from? What did you think of this incredible journey from heartbreak to healing? If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing tales that prove love really can conquer all.